It was nearing Christmas of 2021, and by that I mean it was mid-November. I live in the United States, so Christmas and holiday items tend to go up as early as October. Being that I was at the time 16 and female, I always tried to get my shopping done early, because a lot of my gifts were handmade. For some background, there are a lot of shops, small grocery stores, and the local uptown within walking distance of my house. It was at the uptown where this occurred. One of my brothers, Anthony, was really into music and was learning different musical instruments, so I decided to go to this specific store in the uptown that sold musical supplies. Because of my schedule though, I wasn't able to go until well after 4, which was when the sun started to set. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have tried to go that late, but I was desperate enough to finish my gift shopping by the first week of December. I stopped at the local Dollar General to get some paint I run out of recently, then across the street to the uptown for Anthony's music supplies. While crossing the street though, I noticed a large brown truck stopped at the intersection. I hadn't seen a truck of that color in tow or ever before, so it was pretty noticeable. I also noticed that it was turning into the uptown parking lot the same as me. One thing about our uptown is that the majority of it is bars and restaurants, so there were quite a lot of people mingling around some of the bars. It did make me a bit nervous, but the music store was close by, so I decided it would be okay to just tough it out. As I was beginning to enter the store though, the brown truck slowly crept up by me. I was kinda spooked, but I figured whoever it was just being careful of all the people around. Unfortunately, the store did not end up having what I needed, so I placed an order for the following week and left the shop. By now, it was well into dusk. As soon as I left, I saw that same truck parked right outside the store. I brushed it off at first, thinking that maybe they were just in a store nearby and had gone to leave. As soon as I turned my back though, I saw the lights of the truck flick on and the engine roar to life. I basically peed myself right then and there. I turned to look at who was in the car, but the windows were so heavily tinted that I don't know how they were even able to see out of them. The car pulled out and slowly crept behind me. I felt like I was paralyzed. I figured I was going to be kidnapped and murdered right then and there. Thankfully, I found the nerve to run though when the car was about 6 feet away and booked it down the sidewalk. The car started to go faster to match pace with me, and the people from the bars didn't seem to notice or care. I was crying at this point. I didn't know what to do. That's when I saw my saving grace. I saw 2 ladies a little bit younger than my mom sitting outside a coffee shop that had just closed. They spotted me, and I took a chance to run up to them and explain the situation. The pink shirt coffee lady had to leave, but gave the key to the lady in the blue shirt, who offered to let me stay inside the cafe until my mom could come get me. The brown truck drove past over and over, but eventually gave up and left the way it had come. My mom showed up several minutes later. I thanked the blue coffee lady for her help, and I still frequent their shop quite regularly. I'm very thankful to those coffee ladies because they probably saved my life that night. This experience is the reason why I'm so deathly afraid of intruders breaking into my home. I was 10 years old at the time this happened, and it was summer break just after finishing 5th grade. I think it was maybe the 2nd or 3rd week of June. I don't really remember why, but my mom had to go to a dinner with some of her coworkers from the daycare she worked at one night. She left my older sister, who was only 12 years old, to watch over me. My older sister, though, was more so there to make sure the house didn't burn down rather than watch over me. That night, my mom left for the dinner and said she would be right back. I remember I was in the living room, and my older sister was upstairs in her room. I was also downstairs with Fenrir, who was a black Newfoundland that I grew up with my entire life. Unfortunately, by the time I was 10, he was already showing his age. He couldn't walk, run, or even stand up like he used to. We would usually have to help him get up and walk him outside to the backyard, which had a porch. The porch had this walkway we had built, so that Fenrir could walk down easier. We would also have to bring his food and water bowls over to him, as he was always too tired to even get up. So there I am, watching TV in the living room with Fenrir lying down on the side of the couch. Suddenly, though, I hear this loud growling. I muted the TV and turned around, and saw Fenrir was now growling and snarling at something. He then started barking too. I looked over to see what it was, and saw he was directing his attention at the back door that led to the backyard. I couldn't see anything outside though, as it was pitch black out. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Fenrir just stood up with seemingly little to no effort, violently growling, snarling, and barking. Keep in mind, he hadn't been able to get up by himself in a long time. Seeing him stand up like he was a young dog again scared the shit out of me. I used to say that it was almost as if he'd gotten possessed in that moment. Still, he was directing his attention to that back door. Before I even had the chance to react, Fenrir suddenly jogged over to the back door, got up on his hind legs, and started scratching at the glass that was on the door. At first, I thought that perhaps a squirrel had gotten up onto the porch and walked up to the door. But then I remembered that Fenrir wasn't even this aggressive towards squirrels. When he would see one when he was younger, he would bark and chase at it, yes, but it was more so to scare it off rather than actually hurt it. And to add to that, Fenrir was not even an aggressive dog. He was always so sweet to people and other pets, and usually so calm. To see him going feral, it sounded like he wanted to kill something. I finally walked over to the back door that Fenrir had been clawing at. I sort of pushed him out of the way, surprised that he didn't snap at me with all his growling. I decided to put my face up against the glass to peek out and see if anything was there, but I still couldn't see anything. All the while, Fenrir was still scratching, growling, barking, and now even baring his teeth and drooling to my right. I then walked to the right where he was, where there was a light switch that turned on the porch lights. Fenrir went back to his spot. Then I flipped on the light switch. The second that happened, I saw a man dressed in all black, the classic burglar outfit, with gloves, a ski mask, and everything. At first, he was seemingly looking into the door, with his hands and face pressed up right against it. When I turned on the lights, he got startled and stumbled a few steps back. He then turned over to me, and it was like time was frozen in place. We were both just staring at each other for more than a few seconds. Me, being only 10 and not really knowing what to do, I quickly reached out to the knob of one of the back doors, more specifically the door that Fenrir was still scratching at, and swung it wide open. The guy tried to run away, but Fenrir was right on top of him. He wasn't even able to make it off the porch before Fenrir latched onto him, and when I say latch, I mean he latched on. He bit down on the guy's leg, then moved to biting down hard on the guy's arm. The guy tried to hit Fenrir off of him, but he was just not able to. I was just frozen, staring at my dog really biting down on this guy. To be honest, I was more so scared of my own dog than the guy who was trying to break in, since I'd never seen him be this aggressive in my entire life. I actually thought he was going to straight up kill the guy. Eventually, due to the guy's screams of agony and despair, I guess this caused my sister to run downstairs to see what was going on. I'm not really sure why she didn't come down earlier when Fenrir was growling and barking the first time, but I digress. When my older sister saw what was happening, she freaked out and called 911. Then she told me to go to my bedroom, which was also upstairs, so I did. I ran up to my bedroom and just stayed there, in shock of what I had just seen and the whole situation in general. A while later, the police showed up and my mom eventually showed up too. She burst through my bedroom and gave me the tightest bear hug I'd ever gotten from her. I remember she was crying fiercely, worried sick I'd been hurt. While I was shaken up though, I had not been physically harmed. At one point, I finally went downstairs. I saw my older sister talking to an officer, while Fenrir was lying down next to her covered in blood almost like Cujo. I remember thinking, oh my god, he just killed somebody. I also remembered that when I put my face up against the glass on one of the back doors to see what Fenrir was so pissed off at, I had most likely put my face directly up to where the guy still had his face pressed against on the other side. So I'd made indirect eye contact with this guy before I turned the lights on, without even knowing how close we were. Thankfully, while the guy did lose quite a lot of blood, he did not die. To be completely honest, I don't really know what happened to the guy afterwards, other than that he got arrested. My mom was instantly looking into buying a new house and moving, and we all eventually moved when I was maybe 11 or 12. Unfortunately, before that, first, I had developed my intense fear of dealing with intruders. So much so that I could never look outside windows when it was pitch black outside for a while, because I was afraid of seeing a face right there. Second, a few months before we moved, we had to finally put Fenrir down, because he was just too old now. Needless to say that 2014 was the year my childhood and innocence died. I'm 18 years old now, and I've since been better about looking outside windows when it's dark outside. While I'm still afraid of intruders, it's not really as bad as it used to be. When I move out, I'm thinking of getting a big dog of my own. I'll be forever thankful to Fenrir, though. Had it not been for him, who knows what that guy could have done to either me or my older sister. I've been in therapy ever since this happened. I sleep with a gun next to my bed now, the lights on, and I cannot be home alone. Here's what happened to me on May 23rd, 2017. In my neighborhood, we had a few burglaries. I work from home, and I'm usually home alone with my son as well. We live near a busy mall, and our neighborhood, even though in a pretty good area, is close to highways and has 3 ungated entrances. It makes it easy for people to break in, steal, and get out before police can arrive. I also scare pretty easily, so hearing an alarm going off nearby or seeing the police helicopter circle above and having the neighborhood swarm with cop cars always freaks me out. For a while, we had a spree of guys going into unlocked cars and stealing stuff. I mention this because there were about 25 cars they were able to get into. Our area was the kind where you could kind of leave your door open and usually nothing would happen. At this point, it was really just petty theft. Nothing major was ever stolen and no one had ever been hurt. Needless to say, for the next few months we all felt very pissed and really violated by what had been happening. Homeowners meetings were packed and everyone wanted to put a stop to the crime going on in our neighborhood. It was soon revealed a rental property in the hood was the home to a drug dealer who was dealing more than just weed. He was selling some hardcore stuff, and it was thought that a lot of the crime stemmed from that house. They had undercover cop cars throughout the neighborhood, just waiting to make a bust. Up till this point, it was pretty scary, but from a far-away point of view. Also, at this point, no one was getting hurt, at least not physically. Our neighborhood watch sent information to make sure alarms are on, windows and doors are locked, and if a car was in the driveway, more than likely burglars would skip your home. Just remember to lock your car doors. Well, since I work from home, my car was always in the driveway. One afternoon in April, my son and I were on a walk. It was a nice day, and about 2 blocks from our house, the cop cars came rushing in. I was told to get back to my house as soon as possible. An officer actually escorted us to our door and let me know to lock every door and window. Turned out there were 3 armed assailants on the run between my street and the next. They broke into 2 houses. In one, a woman was home alone. The 3 men assaulted her, tied her up, and left her for dead. They broke into a second home as well and pistol whipped a man that was home. The next week, a woman was nearly kidnapped on a 6 a.m. run on my street. The fear was real at this point. Going out alone during the day or night was just not happening, and none of these criminals have been caught either. Then, things died down for a while. Usually every couple days there was a break-in, but there was nothing after this in early April. In late May, I had to take my car into the dealership for some work. I was left without a car for about 2 days. To keep my son busy, we would go on long walks to the mall with 2 other moms and their kids in the morning, then go swimming in our pool in the afternoon. A lot of the stay-at-homes grouped together because of fear of the recent goings-on. This particular day, it was actually very nice out, so I had all of our sliding glass doors open, and I was letting the house air out. While I was bathing my son, though, I suddenly got a very funny feeling, so I rushed and locked all the doors and blinds as quickly as possible. Even though it was our backyard, I didn't feel safe leaving those doors open, with me down the hall in a bathroom. Just as I was walking away from the last door, I saw 2 large men entering my backyard on our security camera in the kitchen. We have 3 stations in our house where you see the feed from the cameras inside and outside. 1 in our bedroom, 1 in the office, and 1 in the kitchen. My husband does security systems, so he set us up with the most elaborate and expensive unit. We had 2 padlocks on the gate already, so I was pretty freaked out that they had managed to get in. These men were big guys too, at least 6 foot and around 220 pounds give or take. I'm 5'3" and 140. I'm not exactly tiny, but I'm not a match for someone who's that huge either. The guys were trying to look in through all the windows, so I edged back into the bathroom and realized I'd left my cell phone outside by the pool. I couldn't call anyone or get attention from outside my house. All I had was my work phone in the office that needed to be booted up to be used. I was on vacation for the week too, so the system was shut down for that entire time. I grabbed my son, his diaper bag, and made our way into the office. The room was pretty soundproof. You'd have to be screaming full stop for it to be heard outside. It also had access to security cameras, where you could actually hear audio from the cameras, and it has a heavy-duty lock on the door as well. My husband had set it up after that sexual assault so that it could be a panic room if we ever needed it. It was hidden in our garage, so unless you turned on all the lights in there, you'd have to walk around his tool bench and a high shelf. If you were not looking, you might not even realize there was a room there. My son thankfully fell asleep on the rug in the room. As I was freaking out watching these guys, they used a little hammer to break the sliding glass door to enter my bedroom. At this point, I was getting my computer started up to call the police. Once they were inside, I was only able to see them in the living room, kitchen, and my son's room. They were going into all 5 bedrooms in my house, rummaging through closets and drawers. The larger of the 2 men walked into the living room. He had my cell phone in his hand and literally looked at the camera in the living room and waved it around. He then opened his bag, pulled out a knife, rope, and duct tape, and what I later found out were condoms. "Hey, pretty mommy, where are you hiding? We want to have some fun with you." I realize now these guys weren't here just to steal stuff. Thankfully, I was finally able to call the cops. They told me to stay secured in the room, turn off the lights, stay on the line, be as quiet as possible. These guys were tearing my house apart, calling out my name, looking for me. They even started calling my son's name. This part freaked me out. Just how the fuck did they know our names? One of the assholes even started eating the chicken I'd just baked for dinner. They were rummaging through my laundry room, and one of them grabbed a pair of dirty underwear and inhaled deeply. It was the most disgusting thing I'd ever witnessed, and I was just praying they wouldn't find us. They made their way into the garage, and were looking around everywhere. I could only see a little portion of this from the kitchen camera now. I was praying they didn't turn on the lights to see the entrance to the office in the corner of the garage. I was whispering into the phone, keeping the dispatcher up to date on what I was seeing in our security feed. She told me the cops were 4 minutes out. The assholes were now rummaging through the garage. I heard them playing around with my husband's power tools. My son woke up and thankfully didn't start crying. Instead, he quietly looked at me and began sucking his thumb. I knew what these jackasses had in mind for me, but I was scared to think what they were going to do to my son. That single thought brings me to tears, even as I recount the situation to tell it. I brought my son into the closet of the room with a flashlight, bottle, and blanket, and I mouthed for him to be quiet and shut the door. The dispatcher told me the cops were now 3 minutes out. Her name was Janice. I begged her to tell them to hurry up. She told me to keep calm and that she was there with me. She recommended I get in the closet as well. I didn't because I didn't want them to think about my son if they broke through the door. Then I heard them start pounding on the office door. These guys were pulling at it, and it sounded like they were throwing their entire weight into the door. I could hear my husband power saw. At this point, the bigger guy screams, "Bitch, I know you and the baby are in here. We're here to fuck you up. You should have just come out when we came in." I was literally shaking and praying the door and lock would hold up. I moved a dresser in front of the door. No idea why I did that, but I'd seen them do it in movies before. Then I pushed the futon in the room against the dresser, just praying the weight was enough to keep them out. I told the dispatcher what was going on. She told me the cops were through my front picture window. I look at the security system, and sure enough, it looks like 4 or 5 cops had just arrived at my door. The rest was a blur. I felt like it was taking forever with all the noises of taking the guys down. Then there was just silence. I was sobbing and rocking in the dark with my son in my arms. He sat there quietly hugging me and patting my back. Soon I heard a knock on the door. It was a female officer. It took me a moment to open the door, and I didn't even realize I still had Janice on the phone with me. The guys were arrested. They were caught with large amounts of cocaine, meth, and roofies on them. It seems they had broken into the drug dealer's house before they broke into mine. The cops later disclosed that they had been watching me and stalking me for a few weeks. They knew I was home all along, and I was just the next victim on their list. Thank God they didn't get to me, because I have no idea if I would still be here to tell this story. We actually were able to sell our house 2 months ago, and we moved out of state. Our new hood has a gated entrance. My house has security cameras in every room, and I have a gate around the entire property as well.